I recently played through Tetris Effect, which is a fascinating game. It took one of the most basic concepts in the games industry and attempted to turn it into a transcendent experience, one that affects how you think and makes you feel things. But it's Tetris, right? Surely they can't do that with something like that. You just drop blocks and try to fill lines up in a way that nets you points. How can that be transcendent and life-changing? If you question this, it might be worth remembering who the producer is. Tetsuya Mizuguchi is well known in the game space for his constant attempts to make players feel the sensation of synesthesia, where your senses blend together and you can see, sound and feel colours. Rez was the most iconic example of that, a rail shooter where your shots fired in time with music and visuals pulsed in time too. It also came with a vibration device that allowed you to feel the game wherever you chose to. And yeah, people did frequently put it exactly where you think they did. Anyway, the man who made that, making Tetris, suddenly seems like it could be a trippy experience, and it absolutely is. It's still Tetris at its core, but the way it blends its visuals and gameplay together with an ethereal electronic soundtrack just builds it into something more. When you land shapes, notes will play and lights will flash, while the backgrounds take you on a grand journey going around the world to festivals, deserts and snowy mountains. You go under the sea and swim with dolphins and whales before soaring up into the sky with hot air balloons and flying low in the atmosphere with birds. You even end up in space in some stages, whether that's on board a spaceship or watching planets collide with each other. Even though the gameplay can get difficult at times, these elements all blend together to create a strange sense of zen. A sense that everything's going to be okay. It reminds us all of the beauty around us and just settles the mind. It's beautiful and, yes, it is transcendent. In all the ways that Rez was 20 years ago, although I never actually played that beyond the demo. Even from the very beginning of the game, where a pounding heartbeat like kick drum reverberated through my computer speakers and a soft female voice sang sweetly about how we're all connected, I knew what I was in for. The soundscapes washed over me, and moments like dolphins leaping out of the water at the climax of a track were breathtaking. And in the final stage of journey mode, the one stage I've yet to beat, the moment when everything dropped out, and there was this. I may have shed some tears to Tetris. But while Tetris Effect does everything in its power to elicit this kind of response to the player, I already understood the concept intimately even before playing it. Because this is not the first puzzle game where I have experienced an intense emotional reaction. Let me take you back in time. So I am going to explain what this game is, but for context I need to ask you a question. Have you ever heard of Net Eurozone? If you haven't, it was a dev kit for the original PlayStation that the average consumer could casually order from Sony. For your money, you got the appropriate software, manuals and other equipment, including a special black PlayStation that could run the debug software. And there was a strong hobbyist scene around it. A bunch of bedroom coders latched onto it and made their own little projects for it. Very few of them were commercially successful, or indeed commercial products to begin with, especially as so many were just clones of simple, classic arcade games. A large number of these were only seen by the public on the official PlayStation magazine's demo disc, and while most were fairly rudimentary, they showed some real talent from amateurs, and some of the more talented hobbyists ended up turning their experience with the platform into careers. The director of Final Fantasy Crystal Chronicles, for instance, got his start with the game Terra Incognita, which was built with the kit. However, one game did somehow escape to the retail market and even managed to get itself published by Sony themselves. That game was Devil Dice, and it's the game that provided an emotional response similar to Tetris Effect, albeit 20 years earlier. No, please, hear me out. This will all make sense. So, Devil Dice is a simple puzzle game starring these cute little Teletubby devil creatures that make squeaky noises, and they roll dice. No, not like in a board game or an RPG, they literally roll the dice over and over as a means of transportation. And you did this in order to match the faces on those dice, with the number on there indicating just how many dice you needed to match. So, 2 2s and 3 3s and so on. There were multiple modes, some of which were competitive and others which focused on set puzzles with solutions that you had to figure out. And I know, you were all sitting there thinking, how did this basic ass game give you an emotional experience, Bob? Like, what is wrong with you? You're probably thinking that I sound pretty crazy right now. And, well, I kind of am. You see, that's the important thing, because I've said in previous videos that I've dealt with mental health issues throughout my life, and that's important to know in order to understand the impact that this game had on me. You see, the moment I had this experience was a time of heavy mental stress for me. What's more, I found it difficult to engage with anything creative or be able to engage with much media. I couldn't watch films, couldn't play many games, that sort of thing. But what I did manage to play was Devil Dice. I wanted to play something but didn't have the mental capacity to deal with anything too intense. So I threw on endless mode in this very simple game and just started playing. I don't really know what I expected, but it certainly wasn't anything therapeutic. Because that's what it was. Therapeutic. In a way that I didn't get from any other game. While playing, I could focus on the dice matching, and since it was endless mode where you just kept going until too many dice spawn and your devil gets spirited away screaming painfully, I didn't have a goal to focus on. I could just play and try and forget everything that was bothering me. I did not forget anything, however. Instead, something else happened. Because my brain was so focused on this game, something low effort but still requiring some degree of calculation, I had some reserves left in my mind. And those reserves decided to take the issues plaguing me at the time and just start processing them. Of course, my brain was constantly processing all this stuff anyway, that's just how anxiety works. But the stimulus provided by these monsters and their inexplicable dice prison did something to my brain. It settled it, like it was distracting the anxious parts while keeping the more logical problem-solving parts active. And it was here that I could focus on my problems and think about how I was feeling and consider solutions to things that I could fix. I turned the game off after about an hour or so and felt better? I felt calm, a little more self-assured and a little bit happier. It was a revelation and one that I rarely get with many games on that deeper level. Of course, the positive mental benefits of games in this genre are well documented. Video games as a whole have positive mental impacts, from strategy games making you better at problem solving, to Souls-likes making you accept the possibility of failure and learning from it, even if it is endlessly frustrating. But puzzle games specifically have shown to have huge impacts on mental well-being in surprising ways. In 2015, a study by Plymouth University and the Queensland University of Technology took participants who had trouble with addiction and made them play Tetris. It didn't matter what the cravings were, whether they were for alcohol, tobacco, junk food, sex, whatever, just as long as they had intense cravings for that thing. Participants were asked to rank the level of cravings prior to the study, and then play Tetris and report how they felt afterwards. The control group, who did not play Tetris, saw no change in their level of cravings. Those who were given the game, however, showed that playing only 3 minutes of it reduced their cravings by a fifth. The effect was consistent over the course of a week too, suggesting its effectiveness might not diminish, although a longer experiment could have determined if there is a point where it does. Scientists theorize that the reason for this is that the cravings often create a visual fantasy, encouraging them to pursue the thing they want, and that Tetris, with all its visual stimulus, interrupts that and forces the brain to focus on achieving something rather than relieving their cravings. In the same year, researchers at Oxford and Cambridge did a similar study, this time focusing on post-traumatic stress disorder. 40 participants were made to watch a traumatic film and then shown stills from the movie right before the worst parts. They were then asked to play Tetris. During this, participants were told to keep diaries of intrusive thoughts, recalling memories of the traumatic scenes. The results were similar to those in the addiction experiment. Tetris reduced the flashbacks considerably, not to a great enough degree to be used solely as a form of therapy in future, but to enough of a degree to be significant for further study, and to potentially use the game as part of wider therapy. The theory here is that the act of playing Tetris disrupts something in the memory creation part of the brain and prevents traumatic memories from surfacing so severely. What's more, Tetris always seems to be the game doing this, although there don't appear to be many experiments involving other puzzle games. And while I am not a scientist and nothing I am about to suggest should be taken as definitively as the studies I just mentioned, my experiences seem to reflect those of the study participants, albeit for a different condition. Which brings me back to Devil Dice. If Tetris, a simple game about blocks, can have positive effects on addiction and PTSD, then maybe Devil Dice, another simple game about blocks, was capable of positive effects for my anxiety. Devil Dice calmed my brain and let me process my thoughts in a healthier way, rather than letting them run rampant and becoming intrusive and stressful. Only one other thing has helped tackle this problem: mindfulness meditation. If you're unaware, this is a technique that requires you to stop and focus on your breath, noting the in and out motion of the air, and focusing on that above anything else. It's not a method about attempting to ignore thoughts swimming in your brain, as this is generally ineffective, but instead to view them differently. With anxiety, every thought that enters your head is the most urgent thing in the world, and these thoughts pile up, as while you're trying to deal with one thing, you end up getting more thoughts that you need to deal with. This gets worse when those thoughts are about things you can't immediately address, because now you have a million things that you have to address right now but can't, and oh god, now I can't sleep. Mindfulness meditation forces you to focus only on breathing, and in the process make note of all these thoughts. Not to act on them, but to note them. The process teaches you to be aware of every thought you have, but to learn to file them away. It encourages a method of saying that yes, this certainly is a thought that I have, instead of that thought must be addressed right now, oh my god. But this does require an element of being able to slow down in the first place, and in the middle of a severe episode this may not be possible. For me, Devil Dice had a similar impact to this meditation practice, but instead of having to think breathe in, breathe out, some weird onesie creatures are insisting I match dice with them while bland techno plays in the background, and that strangely works as a distraction. Because just like the meditation forces me to file thoughts away or simply let them float off into the ether, Devil Dice had a similar process of forcing me to file thoughts away. It wasn't exactly the same, as mindfulness encourages stoic observation, while my brain on Devil Dice was laying all those thoughts out on a conspiracy board so the bigger picture could be seen. I was lining up my various anxiety and matching them to each other, allowing them to be sucked into the floor slowly like so many virtual dice. It was a weirdly profound experience for me, and one that arguably started me on my path to improved mental health. However, I will again stress that my experience is not backed by scientific evidence, and I would not advise anyone play this or any other puzzle game as a replacement for therapy or other treatment for mental illness. But in my experience, it certainly helped. And while Tetris Effect did everything it could to elicit an emotional response, and I do get a similar reaction from that game, it's impressive that I was able to get that similar experience with a goofy little game made to fit into the deliberately restrictive limits of a hobbyist dev kit from the late 90s. Devil Dice was not a major title, nor is it a particularly complex one, but the effect it had on me at the exact moment in time I needed it was massive. It's not an all-time favourite, but it is important to me, and it shows that the positives of gaming as a medium can come in some really unexpected ways. It is why games are good. Thank you for watching, everyone. I know this was a weird one, but I'd love to do more videos like this on the small positive impacts that gaming can have here and there. Do you have a game that had a surprising impact on you and your life? Just let me know in the comments below. And while you're there, don't forget the usual like and subscribe stuff, you know the drill. And as always, a big thank you to my patrons who help encourage nonsense like this. Once again, thank you for watching, and I'll see you again very soon.